I have pulled a lot of people out of wreckage in my time, but I had never pulled anyone out of the dark the way I pulled the Corvain. The call came in garbled, half-drowned in static, on a frequency nobody on the Halcyon recognized until our comms officer ran it through 3-1 translation passes and went very quiet. It was not addressed to us. It was not addressed to humans at all. It was a prayer, repeated on a loop, sent into the silence by something that had stopped expecting an answer and kept transmitting anyway, the way you keep a candle lit in a window long after you've given up on the road. We picked it up 4 hours out from a debris field that used to be an escort convoy. Captain Reyes did not ask the council for permission, because there was no council left on that frequency to ask. She turned the ship. By the time we reached them, the fighting had already burned itself out. Whatever had hit the convoy was gone, off chasing some other prize, and what remained was a single transport hull venting atmosphere through 100 small wounds, holding position only because something inside it refused to stop holding position. Through the bridge viewport, the wreck looked dead. It was not dead. That was the thing none of us understood yet. I went over with the boarding team, because the transport's internal air was failing, and whoever was alive in there had maybe 2 hours before the cold finished what the attackers hadn't. The transit pod ride over was the longest 12 minutes of my career. Nobody talked. Sergeant Okafor ran his hand checks on the cutting rig 3 times, which was 2 more than he needed, and I understood it for what it was. Not nerves about the wreck, nerves about what we might find inside it. We had pulled humans out of worse hulls than this one. We had never pulled anyone out of a hull built around an architecture none of us had studied, with no idea whether the survivors inside would see a cutting torch come through their wall and read it as rescue, or as the second half of the attack. We cut our way through a buckled airlock into water, not flooding, held water, deliberate water, an entire deck designed to hold it, lit faint green by bioluminescent growth along the walls. The Corvain were aquatic, gill-fronded, built long and low for swimming corridors their builders had never meant to drain. When the hull breached, half their world had drained anyway, and the survivors had crowded into the one chamber, still pressurized enough to keep a swallow of their sea alive. There were maybe 40 of them in a room built for 10. An elder met us at the threshold, old enough that the bioluminescence along her flank had dimmed to a tired amber, and she did not raise a weapon. She raised both hands, empty, and said something in a clicking, layered language our translator caught half a beat late. "We did not call for you. We know," I said. "You called for someone else. We came instead." She did not flinch the way I expected hostility to look. She flinched the way grief looks when it remembers it isn't alone anymore. Later I learned her name, or as close to it as our mouths could manage, Tessain, and that she had been the convoy's senior elder for longer than most of the survivors had been alive. Her people had been running for 6 months, fleeing a border conflict none of us had ever heard of, calling on every old alliance and older god they had, and getting nothing back but the same dead channel, over and over, until even the prayers had started to sound like habit instead of hope. She told me this much later, in pieces, in the patient half-language we built between her clicks and my words, and every piece of it explained a little more of why 40 people had crowded into one airless room rather than spread out into a dozen safer ones. They had stopped believing that space was safe. They only believed in each other, and barely that. Her granddaughter was the one I went to first, because the elder's eyes kept going to a small shape wrapped in a salvaged thermal sheet near the back wall. And you learn to read that look fast in this job. The girl, I am using the word loosely, she was young in whatever way the Corvain measure young, had taken shrapnel through the gill fronds along her throat, and she was drowning in air the way her people drowned in air, slow and silent, because nobody on that ship had the tools to operate on lungs that worked sideways from ours. I had never treated Corvain physiology. There is no manual for it. I worked from her own labored breathing, from the elder's hands showing me where the fronds connected to the deeper airway, from 40 silent strangers who had decided, somewhere in the last 2 hours, to trust a species their prayers hadn't asked for. It took 11 minutes. It felt like the whole transit out. I worked with Okafor's penlight clipped to my collar because the chamber's bioluminescence kept shifting brightness with the Corvain's collective breathing, and twice I had to stop and recalibrate against a wall that brightened green, with what I can only describe as held breath. All 40 of them watching a stranger's hands work on a child, none of them could touch without breaking the surgical field. I have operated in worse light. I have never operated under that particular kind of silence, not fear, not anger, something closer to a held note, waiting to find out which way it would break. When she breathed clean, the chamber didn't cheer. It went very still, the way a room goes still when something it had stopped hoping for finally happens, and you're afraid that hoping too loud will take it back. Outside, the rest of the boarding team worked the wreck the way we always work a wreck. Fast, quiet, no wasted motion, sealing breaches, running power back to the life support core, hauling the dead aside with more gentleness than the dead usually get. Petty Officer Lindquist rerouted 3 failing pump lines by hand because the automated repair drones couldn't read the alien housings, and did it without once asking anyone to admire the effort. No one shouted orders. No one postured for an audience that wasn't watching. We were not there to be seen being heroic. We were there to get 40 people somewhere with a working sea before their air ran out, and that is a job, not a performance. The Corvain began, slowly, to notice the difference. I watched it happen in small increments. A young one drifting closer to the breach to watch Lindquist work, instead of cowering from the noise of it. An old male easing himself between 2 crewmen to help steady a buckled support strut. Neither of them had the leverage to hold alone. Nobody asked him to. He simply saw a problem his hands could solve and solved it. And Okafor clapped him once on the shoulder, the universal gesture for good work, and the old male's fronds flared a startled, pleased blue that needed no translation at all. The elder watched all of it from the doorway of the medbay, her amber light slowly climbing back toward green, and I understood, late, the way you understand most things in this line of work, that she had been waiting for us to be something. Loud, cruel, indifferent. Something she could file alongside the silence the rest of the galaxy had given her people. We kept declining to be that. Your gods didn't send us. I told her, because it seemed like something that needed saying out loud. Nobody sent us. We just heard you. She studied me for a long moment with eyes built for reading current and pressure, not faces. And I have no idea what she found there. Whatever it was, she reached out, slow, deliberate. The way you reach for something you're not sure will still be there when your hand arrives, and pressed 2 fingers against the back of my glove. Ishika, she said. Just that. Twice. Our translator didn't have it. It still doesn't. I asked her. Later, through the broken patchwork of clicks and human words we'd built between us by the time we reached the Halcyon's Bay, and she only repeated it a 3rd time, softer, like the word itself was doing work that an explanation couldn't. We towed the transport the rest of the way under daylight, because Reyes wanted them to see open sky through their cracked ports, instead of the dark they'd been adrift in, and somewhere around the 2nd hour the Corvain began, very faintly, to sing. Not in grief, not in fear, something else. Something I didn't have a word for, any more than they had a word for whatever I'd done in that medbay. I stood at the ramp when the hospital ship took them, watching the elder carry her granddaughter out into a morning none of them had been promised, and I thought about how the distress call had never once asked for people like us. It had asked for gods, for ancestors, for anyone with the power to make the silence stop. It got a frigate full of tired engineers, and one medic who'd never treated a Corvain lung before. That night, I still don't know if that counts as an answer to a prayer, but I know the elder pressed 2 fingers to my glove every time she saw me. After that, all the way to the hospital ship's ramp, saying the same untranslated word. And I have decided I don't need the translation to know what it means. We weren't who they called for. We were who showed up.